Hello, everybody. This is Michelle with Bob Rewards Club. I'm here bringing to you part two. Today, our discussion is going to be about, again, we're talking about reparations in the ADOS movement, okay? ADOS is just a hashtag, and that was created by Antonio Mora and Yvette Carnell. The actual reparations movement is a movement that has been now going on for some time. So today I'm going to be talking to you about the blacks who built America, holding again the United States accountable. This is part two, and this is on enslaved blacks in the United States and what ADOS really means. Because there's been a lot of confusion about ADOS versus blacks who are part of the African diaspora and whether or not they should be included. It's very important that this is not about dividing black people. It's about the American descendants who are from slaves, their heirs, that they get reparations for their injury. So that's very important that we make that distinction. So for the past week, why this is blown up in Black YouTube, you have the Caribbeans, the Africans, the immigrants, okay, are the first generation Africans from the diaspora who have been fighting about how they're not included in this ADOS. This has nothing to do with us being all black. This has to do with the American descendants of slaves getting the reparations that they deserve for our loss, for our injuries, and for the wealth gap that was created. Okay? So, and I don't even think we need to put the wealth gap in there, folks, because of the fact that anybody who does any work should be paid. There are laws on the books about labor. There's no reason why slaves never received their reparations. Our ancestors never received their reparations. So I think it's very important that we kind of have this discussion. Plus, I want to talk a little bit about affirmative action and why reparations was affirmative action was not reparations. It's very important that you understand that, as well as we need to revolutionize the American mindset so that these people in America, the immigrants or whoever, if you're an American and you are a citizen of the United States and you pay taxes, even though slavery was not something that you personally contributed to, it is still a part of the American fiber of this country. The blacks in this country, the ADOS, okay? We built this country. Our ancestors built this country. And it's very important. Now, your family might have been a slave over in the Caribbean or somewhere, okay? Or even over in Africa. But that needs to be taken up with the governments of those countries, not the American government. Okay? So, Kevin, thank you for joining. I am referring to, this is an injury, and this is about labor. This is about black people not being paid for their labor in this country. Cotton was the #1 product that really, cotton made America be what it is today. And who picked that cotton? It was Africans. It was blacks. It was ADOS. It was all of this. And so I just want to make sure that we are clear on that. Okay? And yes, I agree, Fly Seed, the Black Indian. Our ancestors were beaten and hung to work for free. Now we are being shot by white police. Yes, we are still being oppressed. And that is part of our argument for us to get our reparations, is that we have to hold the United States accountable for the wrong that they've done. Okay? So I want to go ahead and play. You guys are familiar with Antonio Moore and Yvette Carnell. And for those people who are not familiar, I think it's very important that they do get familiar. So I'm going to go ahead and play a video. And thank you too, you guys. I think it was Fly C. You sent that link to the IBW21 organization. IBW21 stands for Institute of the Black World 21st Century, and they are an organization that is helping out with the reparations movement as well as there's a lot of organizations and a lot of different groups, and it's now time that we all kind of unite and we come together to focus on dealing with this issue. We cannot let America and the world not know how we have suffered as people in this country. Okay? And I also want to throw this out as well as BOB itself. BOB stands for Black-Owned Businesses. If you're a BOB member and you're listening to this, or if you have a Black-owned business and you would like to become a BOB member, I would say join our group. We are a think tank. I created BOB so that Black businesses have more of a voice in this country, okay? And that means politically. And this topic here, dealing with reparations, is something that I want all my BOB members to gravitate to. I have created a think tank. And you can, certainly go to our Facebook and join BOB Rewards Club. We have a group. So join that and you'll get more familiar. Now, if you have a business and you want to join BOB, it's only $25 a year. Or if you want to be a consumer, contribute to BOB, it's $10 a year. So I just kind of want to throw that out there. And I'm going to go ahead and show you guys. I don't know if you saw it, you guys. Let's see here. My screen. And there you can see there, you can join, like, in case you don't know. Okay.
Radio Talk X. Please also use the super chat in the YouTube. When I say the chat, I'm looking at my YouTube channel. We got 1,000 people in there talking and sharing and building. But use the super chat or go to tonetalks.org to subscribe and donate. Share this video. And we got like millions of people on Dash Radio listening as well. What I'm coming to is I'm always leery of politicians, black or white, but particularly black politicians that are shot out of a cannon. And it feels like that's what's going on with Kamala and Corey. These are not stalwarts in our black community, and I don't know how many of those people were building anyway. You go back, and Cory Booker, one of the things that shot him into national fame was Mark Levin, who I did my documentary Freeway Cracking the System with. He did Brick City, which was on Sundance Channel, and it showed this mayor, I believe, of Newark, and he's running around saving animals and fighting fires and talking about unity. You know, I guess for me, I wonder, I like people who's been talking about like wealth inequality the whole time.
or 25.
All right, let's skip it.
And it could be accessed for a number of purposes. It could be accessed for the purpose of trying to purchase higher education. It could be accessed for the purpose of trying to start a new business. It could be accessed for the purposes of setting up a retirement fund. It could be accessed for the purposes of providing bequests to the next generation, which is what wealthy people do all the time now. But because the way in which the program has been designed anchors on median wealth, the wealth of the persons at the middle of the wealth distribution, it does not eliminate the racial wealth gap. And so it's not going to be adequate for that purpose. We should the reparations and so-called baby bonds or child trust accounts or young adult trust accounts are not mutually exclusive. You can inaugurate both programs, and as you said, the baby bonds type of proposal addresses general wealth inequality, but the reparations proposal should be directed at the specific and particular form of wealth inequality that confronts Black Americans who are descended from folks who were enslaved in the United States.
So I look at Cory Booker and you know, I'm looking at his history in Newark, and that's all we have, and it was kind of sketchy, to be honest. You look at his corporate welfare and his incentives to Audible.com, to Pitney Bowes, to Prudential, while he left regular Black businesses with nothing in terms of aid and packages. When you look in 2010, he laid off.
Okay. You guys can go take a look at that video. It's on YouTube. My thing is, we need to create real generational wealth. Okay. Just like the Native Indians got, the Native Americans, they got land. We need to get land. Land is money. I am not with this no tax breaks, this with getting tax breaks, these baby bonds, these birthing credits, college tuition reimbursement, even a small amount of cash. Because we know in our community we do have conspicuous consumption. We have people that will go take some of that money and do wrong with it. Well, and it'll only last them for a short period of time. And I'm not even for this business loan mess. Okay? Because what we need is, we know that land creates real wealth in this country. And we can have all these other things come in another form of a benefit or package, bill or whatever, but for the reparations itself, I think we need to revert back to what General Sherman and Abraham Lincoln had and what was passed back in 1865. And that was the 40 acres. Even the Mule wasn't a part of it, and the $100. That later became a part of it. But those 40 acres, I think the United States government needs to stand by what was given at that time for reparations. And I think that we put those in some form of treaty, some form of an agreement. The land wouldn't be able to be sold. Of course, it would be those ADOS families. And those families can be traced. People think, oh, everybody's going to come claim. No. Our government has a record of slaves. They know who ADOS people are in this. We were traded on the stock market. We were sold and slaves were registered. So all this talk about, oh, well, so-and-so is going to claim that they're ADOS, all that's bullshit. All that stuff does not need to be, I do not think that we even need to be going there. We need to stay focused. And we need to stay focused on history. We need to look at cases. We need to look at things that have already happened. And that means that we need to take into account that what was passed in 1865, some slaves were already granted for over 400,000 acres of land along the Savannah, Georgia, South Carolina border. That land was retaken back. Now, I've heard of other stories as well. And I know for a fact, even with my husband's family, their property is broken down by 40-acre increments. So at one time, they had 120 acres of land in Texas. Now it's down to 80. And I have to question, why would that be? I know in Louisiana and some of them southern states, some slaves did get their reparations. I don't know if they later on bought it for a small amount of money or whatever. But I think it's kind of odd how the increments of land are broken up when I hear about land that a lot of black people have down in the South. So, even I'm kind of digressing a little bit, and the point I'm making is that land is money. And as we can see what the Native Americans have done to get the land right now, where they're operating these casinos, even though those are not the real Indians. That's a whole nother discussion. Even though I'm not talking about the Dawes Act, where we got the $5 Indians. That's a whole nother discussion. The fact here is that we got to make sure that we're getting land. And so far, what I'm seeing here, when I look at Yvette Carnell's website, this is Antonio Moore, this is their agenda. Now, this is the whole Black agenda. And they've got, my Black agenda does not consist of knowing that realistically, we might not, I want to concentrate on what we have a chance of getting. And that, to me, is reparations and reforming the justice system. Those are the two things that we need to seriously concentrate on. Reparations and reforming the justice system. All this stuff about college and all this stuff, I don't think that right now that needs to be our number one priority. I don't want to hear anybody say about giving a baby bond for reparations. That's just, to me, I find that, disheartening. I find that not acceptable. And it does not, let's revert back to 1865. Give my people 40 acres. If you don't want to do it per slave descendant, because there's more people than do it per family. But make sure that family has been compensated with that 40 acres. So, I just wanted to share that now. I wanted to talk a little bit about the affirmative action here. So that this is from Cornell Law School. A lot of people think that, they want to say that reparations, we've already received reparations. That's what affirmative action is. That is a bunch of crap. Do not ever believe that. Okay? This country was in another place at that time. And you've got to remember that. During the time of civil rights, John F. Kennedy, 1961, put an affirmative action plan because America was integrated. You know, the whole thing about civil rights, it was about integration, pretty much. You know, no segregation in the schools, being able to walk into a restaurant where, you know, the people who, you know, wanting to be served by people that did not even like you in the first place. They didn't want to live next to you. They did not like you, but you wanted to go eat in their restaurant. So that's how come Malcolm X and Martin Luther King were so different. Those two schools of thought and their ideologies were totally different. Malcolm called Martin basically what people are calling a coon today. So whether or not during the 60s civil rights helped Black people is quite questionable, and I would say no. We can see now that no, it did not help us. It gave us a few jobs, and I mean a few, as we can see by how Black people are picked for certain roles in our society. Our politicians, our CEOs, you know, how they're picked. Even our entertainers. So that's why we see so much quote unquote coonery. Because it was about these people, they want white acceptance. And us wanting this white acceptance has really hurt us, because if we look after the Reconstruction period, Black people, when we didn't have access to go into that white neighborhood or to that white store or whatever, we had our own doctors, we had our own store and tradesmen and everything in our own communities. We created places like Tulsa, Oklahoma, Black Wall Street. And there were a lot of them. There were a lot of them even in small northern towns. I know even with my family, being from my dad, who was full-blooded, they moved from Oklahoma up to Iowa. They had soda fountain restaurants. They had all kinds of businesses, Black people did. And this is in a small town in Iowa. So they were all over. We had, statistics show that Black people did much better when we were segregated. And it's hard, it's sad to say. I mean, a lot of us like, having been integrated, fine. I don't think, I don't hate white people, and I don't hate, but I know that when it comes to economics and us having wealth and acquiring more wealth, it has a lot to do with how we interact with one another, our behavior. So, not to go on about affirmative action. Affirmative action applies to businesses. That does include schools. A school is a business. That's why you see a lot of private schools. And again, most businesses now without even having, say if they didn't even do any contracts with the government, they have a diversity initiative. You're going to find a couple of black people. You're going to find a few Mexicans. You're going to find some Asians, some Indians, or whatever. Because America is more diverse. America is more browner. This is obsolete. That's why a lot of your places like California and some states have abolished affirmative action plans when it comes to schooling. Because in a place like California, white people are the minority. So that's why there's so much argument about affirmative action. Now, affirmative action has been amended. Same thing with the Civil Rights Act of 1964. These things have been amended and they widened to include women. Well, it always included women, but it includes the LGBT community now, okay? And I don't see anything wrong with it. What I do see wrong with it is that we need a plan that is specifically for black people. Not for LGBT, not for gays, not for white women, not for immigrants. The reparations themselves need to be for black people. ADOS, black people. Okay? And that's the problem that we have with people saying that affirmative action is, because we are not most of the people that have benefited from affirmative action, if you look and do the research, shows that it's been white women. And now for the past 20 years, it has been, well, the LGBT amendment, I believe that was passed with Obama. So we can't say 20 years for that. But the immigrants and all these people who can put themselves in the category, in the protective classes under the affirmative action, they've all benefited. They've benefited more so than black people. Black people don't even get as many contracts from the government. So I don't want to hear anybody talk about how affirmative action needs to be, it is reparations. I just think that's totally not good. But I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about I got this again, Cornell Law School, affirmative action, definition. I mean, just look at this definition here. A set of procedures designed to eliminate unlawful discrimination among applicants, remedy the results of such prior discrimination, and prevent such discrimination in future. Okay, that doesn't say anything about black people there. It says color, creed, or whatever. This means everybody basically now. So we need something that is for black people. Legal origins, and that's what the reparations will do for black people. This is to all my Americans that are not ADOS. That is what the reparations will do. And it's long overdue. And the only reason why our government, the Supreme Court and the Court of Appeals and all of these district courts not awarding, again, it's the same people that were slave masters are the same people that run our justice system. Okay? It's to their benefit. And it's time we make them accountable for what they have done to black people to ADOS. They need to feel accountable. We do not need to let this go. We do not need to have the divisiveness. We need to all work together. Every organization, every group, every ADOS person needs to work together. This is our movement. Okay? So you can kind of read up on this affirmative action. It's a bunch of, like I said, if it really benefited, like I said, it's only benefited a few, and of those few, they have become the black boule. And that black boule does not communicate always with the rest of the black people. They are disconnected, a lot of them. They are individualistic. They don't think on a collective level. And that may be more of a personal issue. Maybe they have an ego issue. It's, whatever it is, it has not worked. And it's very important that we drill this. It has not worked. And we have not received what we have coming to us, being descendants of slaves. And that's why this is so important. So, it's also important that people who are not ADOS understand who we are. So I found a good article. The root is not the best. Of course, it's owned, I believe, Huffington or something or whatever. It's owned by it's a white-owned black business. Black business. A black business, geared towards black people, okay? We have a lot of that in our community. We have a lot of businesses that portray to be black, but they're not black. I subscribed to it for when I went to this, so I like to keep up to know what my enemies are doing. So, okay. So I kind of want to read this. So this was written by Louis Gates. He was the gentleman that was a close friend to Obama, and they had the Bear Summit. And I would consider him part of the Boule. He is a professor, so they put this together, and it's a good article. It's an old article, but for those that don't understand and don't know about our history, I think you need to get a little bit more familiar with the slave trade, how many slaves were actually, how many people this affected, and just so on and so on. Because, and I'm going to play to you some comments, but in the history of the transatlantic slave, it says it was between 1525 and 1866. And that sounds about right. Because remember, Christopher Columbus came over here in 1492. He was a Sephardic Jew, okay? He was exiled. They were exiled out of Spain, remember? And it says 12.5 million Africans were shipped to the New World. Of them, 10.7 million survived the dreaded Middle Passage, disembarking in North America, the Caribbean, and South America. So slaves were sent all over. But ADOS, this movement, has nothing to do with people from the Caribbean or South America. This only has to do with American descendants of slaves. Okay? So it says children typically comprise 20% or more of a slave ship's human cargo. Okay? Of course, they take these writings from other books and so on. This is actually a pretty good article. It says between 12 to 13% of those embarked did not survive the voyage. So many got sick on the voyage. They died, and a lot of us didn't make it over. Now it says here, the importation of slaves into the United States was banned by Congress under constitutional command in 1808. Yet by 1860, the nation's black population had jumped from 400,000 to 4.4 million, of which 3.9 million were slaves. Now, that's a lot of slaves. That's a lot of slaves for back at that time. The primary reason for natural increase, a distinguishing feature of American-style slavery between 1790 and 1860, reports Ronald Bailey, author of The Other Side of Slavery, Black Labor, Cotton, and Textile Industrialization in Great Britain and United States in the spring 1994 issue of Agriculture History, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so it says here that the population increased between 25% and 33% per year. Per year. Remember, we don't have a problem with fertility in our community like the white people have problem with fertility. Black women have always been able to produce children. The problem like we're seeing right now with fertility, with white women and the men not producing, they've had this problem since day one. And that's for another podcast. But we will talk about that. But so it's very important to note that we never had a problem. That might be a reason why they feel so threatened. And in fact, it is a reason. According to Dr. Francis Welsing, it is the reason. It's because we can produce naturally. And that's just only because we are God's chosen people. We are the original people. Okay? So that's for a whole nother discussion. But speaking of, let's continue on with this article here. Okay. All right, it says here, how about a state-by-state comparison? In 1860, slaves made up 57% of the population in South Carolina, the highest of any state in the Union. See, that's how come South Carolina, as I said in another podcast, had the number one group for Ku Klux Klan. And remember, down on that border of Savannah, Georgia, that's close, that's right on the border to South Carolina. Okay? 400,000 acres were granted by General Sherman and Abraham Lincoln, 1865, those 40 acres. Some people did get it, but then they end up taking it back, according to the writings. So you have South Carolina that still has a very large black population, ADOS, in South Carolina. And, then it says here, the highest of any state in the Union, coming in second was Mississippi at 55%, followed by Louisiana by 47%. Now, this is very important. If you are ADOS, man, this is very important because you need to trace where your ancestors came from. And if you were a slave, it was more likely that you were from South Carolina, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, Florida, Georgia. Because but remember, slavery was happening pretty much all on that southeastern border there. Now, there was slavery also in Texas, and there was slavery. I found there was slavery in parts of New York. It was a different type of form of slavery. There was slavery in those 13 states. Okay? So that's very important. I think that, that he makes that out into this article. Let's see. It says here, Virginia had the highest slave population of any state. They had, in 1860, they had 490,865 slaves. And you know that Virginia was home to the Confederate capital. You still have a lot of black people that live in Virginia. You can go to our website, bobbywars.club, and go business directory. We are building for every state. You can see what the percentages are for the last census. At the top of there, it's going to tell you, like, say, Richmond, Virginia. Okay, it'll tell you in that city how many black people comprise of that city. So we have already compiled some data already. Okay, and that's part of our plan in building our website, is that, we want people to know that, hey, your dollars do matter. I mean, if you're making up 50% of a city, black people, but we still are city number 4, at the bottom of the charts for poverty, for the wealth gap is, there's something wrong with that picture. There's something wrong. Something wrong there. This doesn't make sense to me. There's something else that we're doing wrong, people. So I just wanted to point that out. Now, it says here, here's one that may shock you. As late 1850, the state of New Jersey, as a result of its gradual emancipation policy, still reported some 236 slaves in the federal census. See, and New York City had slaves too. They had, but it was a different type form of slavery. Indentured, they had different types of slaves, And then they had the sharecropping and all this other crap. In any event, they were still slaves. And it says here, slaves didn't just work on the farms, they were hired out in trades, blah, blah, blah. That's very important. Slaves didn't just work on farms. They were hired out in the trades, worked in factories and on piers, manned sailing vessels. They also built between 9,000 and 10,000 miles of railroad tracks by the time the Civil War broke out. Okay, and that's very important to me. That is why we say ADOS and not Pan-Africanism, because it was the slaves that built America. When you have people that were not paid that lay these tracks, what would these people get paid today for laying a track? That's a very important question. Maybe I need to do a podcast on that one. I mean, what would they get paid? Fly C says, you're right. Reparations was given to ADOS in Georgia. My grandfather and grandfather received 150 acres apiece. I have the papers here with me now, but they took the land back. Yes. Well, I'd love to talk to you, Fly C, because that's what happened. They took the land back when Andrew Johnson became the president. Because remember, they assassinated Abraham Lincoln. Okay. Okay. So I think that's very important about here, where the slaves didn't just work on the farms, because you got to remember that we were everything that you're seeing the Latinos do today. And that's why you hear a lot of people in the conscious world talk about they're taking our jobs, because we were your plumbers, we were your carpenters, we were your your electricians, we built America. I'm just reading. Fly C says the black Indian should I take it to court and try to get the reparations back? Yes. Yes, you should. You definitely should. And you people need to be a part of this movement. You know, directly. If you've got court documents that showed that you received reparations, you need to definitely take that. So you need to hook up with me, and I need to get you hooked up with some people, okay? Later on. Go to my Facebook, which is go to Bob Rewards Club and hit my Facebook. Or you can go ahead and send me an email at membership@bobrewards.club if you haven't already. What I want to say here next is I want to finish this article here. See if there's anything else I thought that was important. I want you to go take a look at some of this stuff if you're not familiar. Now, this is primarily, again, my discussion here today. I wanted to show you this because we have a lot of immigrants that are not really that familiar with the ADOS, okay? I mean, they, we have some people that are literally complaining that they don't think that we deserve our reparations, or that we're dividing. We're dividing the group. And it's not about division here. It is about our getting what's owed to us. Getting what's owed to us. We were never paid for all that hard labor. And the people that were our slave masters are the same people, or the ancestors of, they're the same people running this government. But don't let that be a defeat, because we can get these reparations. There's a lot going on with this. We can get our reparations. But it's not about division here. Now, if you're, like I said, if you're from the Caribbean or South America, or even maybe in Africa, if you're from there and slavery occurred and your ancestors were slaves, you have got to take that up with the government of where your ancestors were enslaved. Not here in America. So I don't want to hear any more about this, but I'm going to play this video here. Now, this is from
Delaney, what people call the father of Black nationalism. You really can't speak about him without speaking about the influence of Caribbean and Africanists such as Robert Campbell. So, to me, the big issue is just the misinformation I see coming out regarding Pan-Africanism.
So, based on what you're saying, let's say that the ADOS approach was not to discard Pan-Africanism, but they did come out and say their purpose or their agenda. Do we have to be conflicting? Could we, coexist? Could you have, for example, there's a group like the NAACP, which is integrationist, Pan-Africanists, we are nationalists, but in some ways we can coexist. So is there a way that we can coexist, or are the two movements naturally opposed to each other?
Well,
anyone can answer.
I'll just give my view on it. It shouldn't necessarily have to be opposed to each other, but I think people in the ADOS movement are making it that way. For example, by doing things like spreading misinformation about Pan-Africanism, and like I said, to me, that's my main issue with what I'm seeing and why I've been writing some articles is that when these people are trying to deliberately misrepresent certain information and misrepresent the history of Pan-Africanism to push a certain agenda, to me that becomes a problem, and it makes it very difficult for people who are committed to Pan-Africanism to really work with these people when we know these are people who are trying to undercut our agenda through misinformation.
I want you to notice that all these people,
before we go to your,
all these people are immigrants, okay? Are their first generation immigrants from some other place. They all have accents.
With the ideology of ADOS,
he might even be
I don't think it's anything significant or concrete into which I could even consider following. It's not organized. I'm not even sure. Two people have claimed to create it, but others who seem to be emerging as leaders have claimed it also, but in a different way. I mean, I'm not gonna get into the specifics because I don't take this too serious. I think it'll be a fad. I do understand a lot of the points that they're trying to make. I don't think it's anything new. I think we have struggled with our identity. We meaning what they are considering ADOS, Descendants of Slavery. I think we have been struggling with claiming an identity for a very long time. And it has caused some issues amongst us and with other people. I do think that it's general knowledge that there is a difference between African Americans, which it has been what we have accepted as our title, pretty much. And I think most people understand that there's a difference between African Americans and Africans and Haitians and whatnot. I consider myself a Black nationalist, and I absolutely agree with the fact that we are a so-called a tribe, our own tribe, and we deserve and will get our own independent southern state. But as a true Black nationalist, I don't know how you can also not be a Pan-Africanist, because how can I say that I want my own southern state and not say that other Black nations deserve their own, and to not say that I'm not going to align with them in a political way. One of the Wayne's articles said something that stood out to me the most is that Pan-Africanism, sorry if I misquote you, but it basically says that it's not just a sentimental movement, it's a political movement, right? So we know that there's a lot of emotions between so-called African Americans, that's what I call it, and Africans from the Caribbean, Africans from the continent, because of the history between us, basically based on, I think, starting with the Atlantic slave trade and that separation. But with that being said, it's still political suicide for us to try to disassociate ourselves with the rest of the Black world. I don't understand it. I mean, I don't see any plans. For what I've seen with ADOS, it just seems as if they're going to try to basically convince politicians here in America to give some tangibles to African Americans. I mean, the same thing that we've been trying to convince them to do for I don't know how many 100 years. I don't know what they're going to do different. I don't see anything planned to do differently. I don't see how any
right,
reasonable nationalist believes that they're going to get any of these things, including reparations, a sovereign state, protected status. I don't know how you can still to this day think that you're going to get that through trying to sway the politicians in America. I don't know how that's still even a thought. So I really do think this is basically just a fad. I think a lot of people are just jumping on to gain some popularity and some viewers and possibly some individual political power for themselves. I don't think this has nothing to do with trying to the betterment of Black people as a whole. I disagree with the title. Even if we are going to come up with a title for ourselves, American Descendants of Slavery is probably one of the worst things that you can come up with. I can't possibly consider myself an American other than the fact as a geopolitical solution to describing where we are from. Sure.
Okay. I just wanted you all to hear that because that's part of a lot of the negativity that's coming out with the campaign, with the movement right now. Number one, we got to change our thought. The way we think is too negative. It's just too pessimistic. And I kind of laid out who asked him what he thinks he said. I don't know if you've been paying attention, but Black YouTube has been going crazy. Okay? Black YouTube has been, I was on a panel on Saturday. I don't even want to post it. If you guys want to go check it out, it's Nyla Says, and it's like an 8-hour video. She does a kind of a Palooza kind of a thing where it's 24 hours for the weekend. And so, but I was on in the morning and I got in an argument with two people. It's like, there are just, and these are people that are ADOS. And it's just, there's so much negativity because that's what happens. We're so used to being divided and bringing each other down and, and thinking so bad about each other before we even, give it a chance. Now, he's right. The reparations movement is not new at all. Remember, we were given reparations in 1865, so the slaves were complaining back then. So let's keep this real. So for people to think that this is a new movement, they're not doing their history. We've been fighting for reparations. A lot of organizations have been fighting for reparations, a lot of court cases. There's a lot of stuff that's been going on. But it was in 2017, and I'm going to do another podcast on this, where John Conyers, Representative John Conyers, he represented Detroit, the Detroit area, Michigan. He came up with the first bill. The first bill to do a study, because you have to do a study. This is the bureaucratic way, okay, where they spend a lot of money doing a study to see if it's feasible. Well, I say, hey, they don't even really need to do that study. They already know. There's enough documentation. There's no need to spend any more money. Put that millions of dollars or billions towards our reparations. This is a bunch of bullcrap. Now, John Conyers, he came in with the bill. Now, do you remember what happened to John Conyers? John Conyers was one of the first Black Me Too's. Remember, before they even went after Bill Cosby, they went after John Conyers about something, him paying off some woman $27,000 in an agreement where she wasn't even supposed to ever talk about it in the first place. So they got rid of him. Now, just recently, and I'm going to do another podcast on it, we have, again, Representative Jackson Lee. She's in Houston, out of Houston, but she is not even an ADOS. Okay? Her ancestors come from the Caribbean. So she's the only Black person, to my knowledge, that sits on the subcommittee where she presented the bill January 3rd, just this year, January 3rd, 2019, the same one that the HR 40 bill that John Conyers originally had submitted or presented. Okay? So first they have to vote on whether or not to do the study, which our Congress hasn't even done that. And that's why I say, hey, we need to focus again on, remember what I said in the last podcast? We need to focus on having Black lobbyists, Black attorneys, comprehensive marketing and advertising, and fundraising. That's what we need to focus on. And we definitely need to have Black lobbyists, number one, because of the fact we need to have people that can concentrate in changing the mindset of our congressmen. Just how the pharmaceutical companies do, just how all the big white companies do, like Amazon or say, any type of group that when they want something done, they work to get people in office that can get it done. And that's what's important here is that we have people that can be contacting these Congress people on a regular basis to let them know that our people need their reparations. And I don't think enough of that's been done. So far, like even when I look at this Institute of the Black World 21st Century, when I see organizations and you start reading their bio, like I'm going to just read a little bit about their bio to you in the beginning. It says, the Institute of the Black World 21st Century emerged as an outgrowth of the State of the Black World Conference, which attracted some 2,500 African American scholars, activists, organizers, and concerned individuals to Atlanta in 2001, convened by a core or group of veteran social and political activists led by Dr. Ron Daniels, who you were listening, no, that was somebody else, but former executive director of National Rainbow Coalition. Look, he's a former executive director of the National Rainbow Coalition, and he's also the deputy campaign manager to Jesse Jackson for president. So when I got to that point right there, when I read their story, I paused. I couldn't even go on because of the fact that we know that Jesse Jackson and his Rainbow Coalition were both compromised. Okay? Like you have a lot of organizations that are nonprofits and Black organizations that kind of start out good, but then somehow they get compromised. That's kind of like the political candidates that we have, like Kamala Harris and Cory Booker. They kind of get off course. They want the people to rally behind them. I'm talking about the Black people, us people. They want us to rally behind them. But then when they get going, they get that money, they get that notoriety, they get known, they forget about Black people. And some of them don't even start out talking about what they're going to do for Black people anymore. Back at that time with Jesse Jackson, he had a Black agenda. Some of these candidates now, they don't even have a Black agenda. So as I said, we need to concentrate on giving as much attention to this subject because it's extremely important, very extremely important that we do that. I'm going to kind of end on that note. I didn't want to take a whole lot of time today. I do want to thank everybody who joined me today for this discussion. And I hope you would join me on the next one. All right. Well, thank you, Fly C, for joining. Thank you for joining me, Kevin Lott. You guys have a good day. And whoever else is here that's not in the chat. Thank you. Have a good day. Goodbye.